In this workshop, we'll explore why every compelling problem a customer wants solved can be measured by one of four dimensions. We'll answer the question, how do you know whether your customers are early adopters or laggards? And we'll examine three tools you can use to best understand the compelling problem your customer worries about the most. I'm Stephen White, and this is Building Lean. Hey there, awesome founders. Welcome back once again to Building Lean, our series of workshops that cover the steps and activities your startup must take to build key business functions to sustainably generate revenues. Not only are our workshops inspired by thought leaders on startup and scale methodologies, but we also share our experience as founders, as well as working directly with hundreds of startups and our research distilling the reasons why over 160 funded startups failed. And that's not all. We answer your burning startup questions related to how you can build your startup lean. Matter of fact, my business partner Shafiq is patiently waiting to join us after the workshop as he'll answer questions you've already submitted related to reaching your target customers, whether massive innovations are really based on customer problems, and how lean frameworks can be used in non-tech industries. If you're interested in growing your startup by building lean, then hit the subscribe button nearby so you'll receive the latest insights that will help you avoid mistakes that cost you time and money. Now, during our last workshop, I discussed how the Founder's Journey framework is an optimal path to converting your idea into a thriving business while avoiding mistakes that waste time and money. I briefly introduced each of the 5 business assumptions that comprise the framework, as well as the 5 fatal flaws that founders must overcome, with each fatal flaw corresponding directly to each of your key business assumptions. Over the next 5 workshops, beginning with this one, I'm going to drill down into each business assumption so I can provide you a better context and understanding of what comprises a business assumption and how to connect your startup's activities to each assumption. So in this workshop, we're going to explore the problem assumption in detail so that you'll be better prepared to recognize early on the first fatal flaw and take the necessary corrective actions before the flaw causes lasting damage to your business. Whether as a founder you consciously think about your business assumptions or not, you're pretty likely familiar that any new product or service is always developed in response to a problem that's been identified. As a matter of fact, it's so important for Shafiq and myself to emphasize this with new founders that whenever we meet one of them for the very first time, before the founder tells us about their startup's product or service, we ask them to describe the problem their startup is solving or intending to solve, as well as who has that problem. Frankly, it's kind of liberating for a founder to not feel judged over whether they perfectly describe their solution, especially when they're just starting out. In our experience, being able to understand their product or service can only come from understanding the problem and customer first. Now, what's funny still is that how often we find that founders still slip into describing their product or service under the guise of describing the problem, even though we just want to understand what the problem is they're trying to solve. It's their desire to want to talk about their solution, which is perfectly okay. And they do that because as founders, we often spend more time thinking about the product we're developing than our customer's problem. And that's true as well when you think about your personal life. When it comes to how friends and family members often ask us, what does your startup do? Or what does your startup make? So rather than indulging our temptations by starting with the product, let's focus where we should first, our customer's problem. This way we can stay focused on getting essential feedback from potential customers instead of trying to answer those well-intended questions from friends and family that mostly result in false affirmation. So this means we have to understand the method by which we'll get that customer's feedback, as in how we're going to validate what problem our customer wants solved and who the customer is that actually has the problem. Now, before we talk about what comprises a problem, we need to acknowledge that problems don't occur in absence of someone experiencing the problem. In other words, when you ask a founder, what problem does your startup solve? That problem must be connected to the person who experiences the problem. Notice I said person. Now, problems could affect more than a person, so I could have said persons. However, a problem is never connected to a corporation, organization, union, government, or any other form of an organizing body. Remember, corporations and other organizing bodies are nothing more than an association of persons, which means those corporations and organizations are devoid of emotion and feeling, and by extension do not have problems. It's only people who work within a corporation or organization that have a problem and feel the negative emotions due to their experience with that problem. It's important that you understand this up front as we dive into the characteristics that define the persons, as in your target customers or defined market segment, who have the problem that your startup wants to solve. So take as an example a car maker. A car maker may struggle with manufacturing defects that cause an increasing number of warranty claim repairs. And your startup may have an automation tool to address this problem. Yet the car maker itself, doesn't actually have this problem. The operations executive who oversees manufacturing may be suffering from this problem. The product designer who made the product assembly too complex may have this problem. The service manager who's seen the number of repairs being performed increase may have this problem. Or it could be someone else altogether. The important aspect to understand is that without knowing whose job is directly impacted by the manufacturing defects, your startup will struggle to solve that problem. The reason is simple. The person who's worrying and losing sleep over the defects will be quite attentive to buying your automation tool if it can demonstrably solve their problem better than existing alternatives. So while this example makes sense for B2B businesses, the same is true for B2C businesses. So say your startup offers summer camps for kids that make learning how to code fun and easy. In that case, are the kids the one with the problem of wanting to learn how to code? Maybe, probably not. If you think about it, it's the parents who are looking for something educational and relevant to keep their kids occupied while they go to work who have the problem. Okay, now that we understand that a problem exists for someone, we want to make sure that we can easily describe a large group of people who suffer from the same problem. So why is that? By solving the problem once and selling the solution to many, many people, your startup can create a lot of value that will enable it to grow quickly, as opposed to one-off solutions that you must customize for each and every customer. So when a group of people who suffer from the same problem, when you have a group of people that suffer from the same problem, we call that group a market segment. As a founder, you should want to know that you're solving the same problem for a similar group of people initially. The question is, how do you find customers who are all suffering from the same problem? To do this, you'll use a technique called market segmentation. A market segment is a group of people who share one or more common characteristics lumped together for marketing purposes. So let's look at each of the 4 types of market segment characteristics in detail real quick. A demographic characteristic is focused on age, gender, ethnicity, or religion. A geographic characteristic is focused on a customer's physical location or region. A behavioral characteristic is focused on purchasing, consumption, or usage behavior. And a psychographic characteristic is focused on lifestyle, social, or personality habits. For your startup's initial set of customers, you'll want to restrict them to both the geographic characteristic as well as one of the other 3. The reason why the geographic characteristic is essential starting out is so that you'll look for customers near you, which will enable you to easily reach and relate to your initial customers during market validation. Now, the benefit also will be that this will accelerate your learning while avoiding unnecessary attention from potential competitors before you're ready. No reason to wave the flag and just invite competition until you're ready to go. So an example of describing a market segment by using the segment characteristics would be, say, a car owner who maintains her own car in Midtown Houston. A well-defined market segment will enable you to quickly assess whether you're on the right track of having reach into your initial customers while clearly understanding their specific compelling problem. Okay, now that you know what comprises a market segment, the next thing you should focus on is whether you're solving a compelling problem. Since we already know that you need to solve the same problem for your target customers, you need to ensure that the problem isn't just a nuisance or inconvenience. There are 4 dimensions to analyze any problem and determine if it's compelling or not. All these dimensions are applied to your customer's current state when they try to solve their problem now with existing alternatives. So to make this a little bit easier to understand, I'm going to frame the 4 dimensions into natural questions that would come to mind if a friend was telling you about a problem they're experiencing. So think about it this way. As you listen to this friend describe their problem, the thoughts that you would have would be, Does their problem cost too much to solve? Does their problem take too long to solve? Does their problem come from a solution that breaks frequently? Does their problem come from having to pull together several items to completely solve it? So to provide context and real-world examples of how understanding each problem dimension applies, let's look at 4 successful companies with each solving for at least one problem dimension. So let's begin with Dollar Shave Club, the billion-dollar startup bought by Unilever that began with a simple but hugely engaging video. What compelling problem do you think Dollar Shave Club is solving for its customers? Yep, that's right. Dollar Shave Club primarily saves its customers money, but it also saves its customers time through its home delivery subscription model that eliminates the need to go to the store to get your next razor. So let's move on to Kayak, the online travel site. What compelling problem do you think Kayak is solving for its customers? Yep, that's right. Kayak is primarily saving its customers time by aggregating all of the travel deals into one location. Now, you could also say that they save customers money as well through comparison shopping. How about a more venerable company, such as Nordstrom? What compelling problem do you think Nordstrom is solving for its customers? Nordstrom solves a quality issue because it places an enormous emphasis on offering the best quality products with an exceptional customer service environment. While some of its inventory may be expensive, customers know that they can always return defective or dissatisfactory products to Nordstrom without any questions being asked. If you think about it, Costco is similar to Nordstrom in this regard, with its emphasis on customer service and a generous return policy. So let's look at one more company, FedEx Kinko's. What compelling problem do you think FedEx Kinko's, I guess they're actually called FedEx Office now, what do you think they are solving for its customers? FedEx Office provides small business owners a complete solution for back office needs. Whether you need print and copy services, mailboxes, or packing and shipping, FedEx Office has it all in one place, which is an important aspect of why FedEx originally purchased Kinko's. Okay, those examples were pretty easy ones to spot the primary problem for each well-established company and what they were solving for. So in some cases, as you noticed already, more than one problem dimension could apply. But the key is that each business started out by trying to solve a primary problem dimension. In other words, Nordstrom isn't attempting to compete with a discount department store on price because Nordstrom's customers are more concerned about the quality of its products and service, which is what Nordstrom delivers. That's the problem that Nordstrom solves for its customers. So how can you fine-tune your understanding of the 4 problem dimensions so you can better describe the problem your startup intends to solve? Well, the easiest way to do that is by examining problem statements from actual startups to see which problem dimension or dimensions that they're addressing. So here we go. Problem statement number 1. Ever try to change your car's oil? It's hard, messy, and you don't know what to do with the dirty oil after you're done. Problem statement number 2. Injury is a regular part of life for athletes and fitness buffs. Recovering from injuries takes too much time and requires too many bulky pieces of equipment that cost too much. Problem statement number 3. Wish there was a way to get that screwdriver set in 4 hours? So which one of these sounds compelling to you? Why is that compelling? Which problem would you say is worth solving? So here's the thing. Answers to each of those questions depend on whether you're the target customer who suffers from the problem. And since I don't know if that's you or not, or if it's a fit, instead, let's examine each of these based on the problem dimension they may or may not address, beginning with problem statement number 1. You know, the one that goes, ever try to change your oil, it's hard, messy, and you don't know what to do with the dirty oil. Now keep in mind, problem statements are used for marketing purposes to provide a potential customer a hint of a solution while accurately describing the problem the customer is experiencing. So the customer's familiar and says, yeah, that's me. So based on problem statement number 1, is it indicating that the problem can be solved by saving the customer money? How about saving them time? Or providing better quality? Or maybe a complete solution? In this case, with problem statement number 1, quality and completeness are the problem dimensions reflected. So let's look at problem statement number 2. That's the one that goes, injury is a regular part of life for athletes and fitness buffs. Recovering from injuries takes too much time and requires too many bulky pieces of equipment that cost too much. So using the same evaluation questions, does problem statement number 2 indicate that there's a better way to solve the customer's problem by saving them money? Say saving them time, or providing better quality, or a more complete solution? What do you think? For this problem statement, 3 out of 4 problem dimensions are being described. Okay, one more. This time, let's look at problem statement number 3. Wish there was a way to get that screwdriver set in 4 hours? Ah, yeah, curveball, right? This one is just a question. There's no statement attached. But that's okay though, as once again, using the same evaluation criteria, what's your answer for problem statement number 3? Does problem statement number 3 reflect that there's a better option for their target customer by saving the customer money, saving them time, providing better quality, or maybe a complete solution? For this last problem statement, only the problem dimension related to time being saved was addressed. As you can see, problems can be classified quite easily into one or more of the 4 problem dimensions. Being able to determine that classification provides you and your team focus when developing both your marketing messages and sales funnel, as well as how you design your solution to solve your customer's primary problem dimension. So as to determine whether a problem is compelling or not, you need to quantify the impact that the problem has on your target customer. Sure, some of the problem dimensions seem more obvious to quantify than others. For example, measuring time and money seem fairly straightforward, which means how do you quantify quality and completeness for comparison purposes? When it comes to measuring quality, one way would be by measuring defect rate or the frequency that a solution breaks when solving a problem. And when it comes to completeness, you could measure the number of steps or items required to pull a solution together. As you can see, this problem dimensional analysis enables you to determine whether you've identified a problem that is compelling enough for your customer to want to pay you to solve it or not. Without solving a compelling problem, you'll never get your customer to change from using their current solution or habit. Getting people to change their behavior is difficult and typically one of the biggest challenges startups struggle with, which means you need to care greatly up front about finding a compelling problem. This will enable you to be confident that your target customers will change their habit when you offer your solution to their compelling problem, as opposed to them ignoring you and living with a trivial nuisance. An example of a company who identified a compelling problem worth solving is SpaceX. Now, I covered this more during episode 1 of Building Lean, but I want to remind you of something. The compelling problem that SpaceX solved related to the cost of launching commercial satellites into space. Once it understood that satellite operators would gladly change who they launched with if their cost per launch was reduced, SpaceX devoted its focus on developing a reusable rocket, as this was its best option to develop a differentiated solution that would be 10 times better than existing alternatives. While SpaceX's initial launches used a traditional single-use rocket, it had proven its problem assumption through pre-sales of future flights with its reusable rocket. Alternatively, if SpaceX had only developed a marginally better solution in terms of cost savings, satellite operators would not have been willing to take their chance on a new, unproven solution, which would have slowed down SpaceX's product improvement process considerably. By the way, SpaceX did identify a second problem dimension related to time, as in how long it took to get a rocket ready for its next flight. As a result, its reusable rockets have been designed to have a faster and faster reuse cycle to address this second compelling problem dimension. Now, it's likely that you've previously seen this chart before, as it was made famous by Geoffrey Moore in his book, Crossing the Chasm. The chasm that your startup must cross relates to changing your customers' habits. Early adopters are more open to new solutions that require them to change their behaviors when compared to the early majority. This is why you focus on satisfying only early adopters when your startup is in the first startup phase of market validation. You have too much to work out at that point to worry about satisfying or risk disappointing the early majority. So to better recognize each type of customer segment, we added a few categories underneath the chart to help you out. Now keep in mind that these would be customers within a market segment defined previously. So let's look at an example of how this actually works. So take the market segment of car owners who maintain their own car, along with a hypothesized problem of when changing their car oil, it's hard, messy, and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to dispose of the used oil after they're done. Early adopters are the ones who have that problem of not wanting to make a mess when they change their own car's oil. They know that they have the problem because they can independently tell you the challenges with the problem itself when asked. And those customers are actively seeking a solution to address this problem. You know this because they're either asking for suggestions of products to buy at a car part store, or they're reading car repair enthusiast blogs, or they're watching car maintenance videos on YouTube. Their buying motivation is to solve the problem, even if it's not a perfect solution. Whereas the early majority wants a proven working solution, and the late majority shows up when everyone's using it. Oh, as for the laggards, they may have a car, but they either bicycle or walk everywhere close by, or they take an Uber when the distance is too far. So they pretty much ignore the problem, even if it exists for them. Each adoption curve type has a different behavioral response based on their experience with the problem you want to solve. So let's look at another real-world example, this one related specifically to the customer adoption curve. When Amazon first started, Jeff Bezos saw the rise of the web as an exciting opportunity to change how we bought consumer goods. Back in 1999, if a consumer wanted to buy anything, they would have had to get into their car, drive to a store, navigate the parking lot to find parking, walk the aisles, find the right item, stand in line to check out, and then finally drive back home with their item. And if this consumer was unlucky and didn't find what they needed, then they had to repeat the entire exercise all over again at a different store. So from day one, Jeff Bezos understood the alternatives he was competing against were not other online retailers, but traditional brick and mortar stores. This meant that he had to find the right type of use case that would help him learn quickly what it took to compete against traditional retailers when selling via the web. Now you may be wondering, why did Amazon choose books for its beachhead market? Why not any other type of goods? Once again, back in 1999, technology did not support very sophisticated ways of showcasing products online. 3D virtual views had not been invented yet, so Bezos and his team had to find a product category that could be easily examined online before a consumer would purchase it. That is why books were such an awesome choice. Now, returning to the customer adoption curve, they had to decide which customers they would target first. They began by solving the problem for rare book buyers who were already searching for additions to their collection and didn't want to go from store to store, which made them perfect early adopters. Amazon quickly understood that to cross the chasm and attract the early majority, they would have had to let consumers preview a book before the buyer would make a purchasing decision, which would be something a consumer could already do in a brick and mortar store. From there, Amazon recognized that to gain market share against traditional retailers, changing the buying behavior of the late majority, it would have to enable a customer to make a purchasing decision easily and quickly, which meant that Amazon had to enable real-time inventory updates, one-click purchasing, and free 2-day delivery. All of these features were rolled out based on customer response and testing, as well as lots and lots of customer interviews to understand where a purchasing decision broke down. It took Amazon 2 years to figure out the full buyer cycle that would create massive adoption of their service for book purchases, which made the buying experience better than existing alternatives and made customers change their buying habit. Once this was in place, Amazon could execute its sustainable growth strategy by scaling the same process when selling music and eventually other discrete consumer goods. Now that you're familiar with the market segmentation and the customer adoption curve, let's look at the tools you'll need to identify the compelling problem that your customer wants solved. First thing you'll start with is customer interviews. This is where you're going to ask potential customers questions about their experience with the problem that you've identified. These are all recall questions, and you will not ask them questions about how awesome your product is. As a matter of fact, you won't even mention your product or service because you want to avoid creating confirmation bias and invalidating your interview results. This is purely a research activity by you, as you're not trying to sell your solution to those that you interview. So you'll begin by asking them about their greatest challenge related to a given situation. This is the hypothesized problem that you've identified. You'll want to know how they try to solve their problem currently, what they like as well as what they don't like about that solution, and how they found out about it. Actually, there are a few more questions than this, which I'll get into much deeper into some upcoming Building Lean episodes, don't worry. By the way, if you want to learn how to properly perform customer interviews right now, we do offer a tight, easy to understand interview script with key questions you need to ask. This interview script maps the data you gather into the information you need to run your initial marketing campaigns. And this script, along with a related project guide and workshop, is available for our incubator members. So be sure to apply today to get access to that, as well as our other tools, guides, and dedicated experts. So let's mix things up for a moment by looking at how not to do customer reviews. Say you're visiting a close friend who insists on showing you a really messy tray full of grease. And she says, "Isn't this gross?" And of course, your response would be, "Heck yeah, that's gross. What in the world is that?" Your friend replies, "Come on, it's just a pan of day-old grease, but check this out." Your friend whips out a towel and proceeds to wipe it across the messy tray. Next thing you know, the grease is completely gone and smooth surfaces are visible. Your reaction naturally would be, "Wow, how'd you do that?" Your friend answers with a triumphant, "It's my magic towel that I invented." Of course, you'd have to ask, "Holy moly, how much does that cost?" Your friend confidently replies, $200 for each one. Now at this point, you'd probably be hard pressed to hide the skeptical expression creeping across your face as you'd ask, yeah, who's going to pay you $200 for a towel that cleans grease? Now, not to underestimate your friend's assuredness, she knowingly anticipates your question by quickly answering, "Duh, the US government. Did you know they paid $400 for just a plain hammer?" Since you're a supportive friend, your only response is, sounds like you're going to be rich. Yet in the back of your mind, you must be wondering if your friend has any clue if their idea will work, much less if the customer they have in mind would be willing to pay for it. Now, what is the problem with this interaction? Well, in fact, there are three things that are wrong. Number one, your inventor friend is talking to you and you're not her customer. Number two, your friend showed you the product before even finding out if you had the problem her product solved. And number three, your friend walked away hearing that she's going to be rich. And so she's thinking she's on something and is ready to blow her savings to get thousands of her towels made. Another tool you'll use relates to the 5 stages of the buyer's journey. The buyer's journey organizes the process in which every customer makes a buying decision related to the first time they purchase a new product or service. Understanding the buyer's journey and its 5 stages will help you collect the right information when interviewing and organizing the data you collected. The information you gain from your customer reviews will be used to build your messaging to reach new customers, build your sales funnel to convert leads into sales, and discover and validate the value proposition that your customers respond to related to your product or service. Now, we'll discuss the buyer's journey further in relation to the channel and price assumptions during these upcoming Building Lean episodes. Now, the customer interview process helps you focus on the first 3 stages of the buyer's journey. This is because early on, you're trying to discover how to activate customers by simply making them aware of the compelling problem you intend to solve. Through analysis of your customer interview results, you'll later understand how to manage your customer's risk in their decision to buy based on their own description of these issues, which are covered during the final 2 stages of the buyer's journey. Once you've completed the interview process, your next step is to determine if by solving your customer's identified problem, can you make a significant difference when compared to existing alternatives? As I introduced earlier, the aspect of quantifying the value of each problem dimension, you'll use that understanding to perform a preliminary relative value analysis. This is our 3rd tool. You'll do this by documenting the steps for each of the best existing alternatives that your target customers use now to solve their problem. You'll know which are the best existing alternatives your customers are using because they will literally tell you this during your customer interviews with them, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, just think about it. Customer interviews make this into pretty much an open book test. Now, one quick note about interviewing. Observation is the preferred trigger method to understanding the full journey regarding how a customer solves their problem today. Once you understand who experiences the problem and under what circumstances the problem occurs, you'll be able to properly conduct interviews by anchoring your interview subject back in the specific situation where they experience the problem you're asking about. So for example, Amazon's customer interviews help them to pinpoint the issues experienced during the brick and mortar shopping journey by, say, suburban moms. Now, observation coupled with customer feedback helped Amazon to understand the true nature of the problem that would not necessarily be available from customer interview notes alone. By quantifying the problem dimension costs for each step related to money, time, and quality, you'll have a good understanding of where the deficiencies exist with your customers' current alternatives so that you can exploit those weaknesses when developing your own innovative solution. And after that, you'll go through a solution ideation process to quickly see where opportunities would be to improve upon competing solutions. If you can identify an opportunity for 10x improvement based on one or more of the quantified problem dimensions, and your solution opportunity is technically feasible, then you would have found a compelling problem worth devoting your startup to solve. Sounds more intimidating than it is, but it's actually a pretty straightforward exercise using these three tools. So where does this all leave you as a founder? At this point, you understand what comprises your problem assumption along with the tools you'll use to document it. But how do you actually make use of your understanding of the problem assumption for your business? Your problem assumption is used to define your market segment and develop your compelling problem hypothesis for that market segment. Once you have those documented, then how do you confirm that your compelling problem hypothesis and market segment is correct? There's only one way: by returning to your direct customer interview data. So how do you know whether you have a validated compelling problem? Well, for the first startup phase of market validation, there are three specific measures. Number one, you can find a beachhead market segment that is dissatisfied when trying to solve their identified compelling problem right now, and you have reached this market. Number two, the problem can be categorized as a compelling problem using a preliminary relative value analysis. And number three, you've interviewed between 50 and 100 customers without creating confirmation bias in the initial market segment, and at least 51% of respondents have the problem and are aware of the problem. By the way, those numbers represent the product adoption curve that will allow you to get your product to go from reaching early adopters to becoming mainstream with the early majority. Again, you should care greatly about performing this due diligence and understanding the problem that you're solving and who has it. Your customer interviews will provide you deep insight to better inform you of later business development decisions. They'll be your foundation and anchor. In the second startup phase, repeatable sales and delivery, you'll repeat the customer discovery steps for each additional target market segment based on three key measures. Number one, you can identify all additional target market segments and prioritize each based on the ease of serving a given segment. Number two, the problem can be categorized as a compelling problem for each segment identified. Number three, once again, you have interviewed between 50 to 100 customers without creating confirmation bias in each of the identified market segments, and at least 51% of respondents have the problem and again are aware of the problem. And finally, in the third startup phase of sustainable growth, you'll repeat customer discovery for each segment, but this time you will validate the problem based on a global strategy. In this phase, for each identified segment, you're going to repeat the interview process for each country or differentiated culture or geography you want to penetrate, which will help you develop a localized channel and solution strategy. All of these validation metrics will help you avoid the first fatal flaw, building a one-off product based on a problem identified using too little data. To avoid this fatal flaw, you have to validate that the problem affects many, many potential customers. During our next workshop, we will dive into the channel assumption, where we will explore the difference between customer acquisition and distribution channels, as well as how to identify a marketing message that will activate your customer prospects. Now, before we jump over to Shafiq to answer your questions, if you're looking to change how you grow your startup by building lean and you find these workshops helpful, please click the subscribe button nearby and give us a like or drop a positive comment. Also, if you know of other founders or product managers who could benefit from our workshops, please share this video with them so they too can build their startups lean and avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Building Lean is brought to you by the Lean Mastery Incubator. Lean Mastery helps founders convert their ideas into a thriving business fast and helps business owners avoid mistakes that cost time and money. Learn more about how you can become a Lean Mastery Incubator member at leanmastery.co. Thank you for watching, and now over to Shafiq to get us started with answering your burning startup questions.